Hello YouTube. Today we're going to be doing a video, thanks for a request from M_bead-P. Hope I said that right. This video is going to be on the Trompowsky variation, also known as the Tromp. He wanted to know what to play against the Trompowsky. So the Trompowsky is after d4, knight f6, bishop g5. Basically, it's a super modern opening. We didn't really do this. You know, you go back 50 years, they didn't really have a Trompowsky. The idea behind the Trompowsky is basically white wants to grab that knight. He wants to pounce on f6 and mess up black's pawns pretty much no matter what black does. That's his plan. So the question of how to play against the Trompowsky is an interesting one because you have to ask yourself first, what's in your repertoire? Okay, so I'm going to be recommending one of three variations depending on how you want to play chess as black. So if you are like a King's Indian defense player, I actually recommend the move knight to e4. Okay, if you are a Nimzo-Indian player, or you are okay with playing Nimzo-Indian under certain circumstances, or you play asymmetrical English, or you are are also an open Sicilian player, like if you play a dragon Sicilian or a knight or Sicilian, I actually recommend the move e6. And actually, this is my personal favorite because I check all those boxes. If you are like exclusively like a Queen's Gambit declined player, I recommend d5. You should be playing d5. And actually, this move was the favorite of none other than Garry Kasparov. He was actually totally okay with this move. Another thing about d5, though, and actually d5 or its sister move, which is very just I think this is a better move for club level players. I think you should play c6 because there's a little trap in here. It's sister move c6 or d5. You have to be okay with accepting doubled pawns. So that's the other thing. If you're not okay with taking these doubled pawns, if you don't like that idea of taking the doubled pawns, if you don't like the idea of white getting a slightly better center than you for a number of moves, like maybe, 10 moves or a dozen moves, you shouldn't be playing c6 or d5. You should either be playing e6 or knight e4. So it's all about what you want to do and also what is in your repertoire if they do decide to transpose this into something very similar to something that's in your repertoire. So c6 is the other way to go. So let's start off with my first recommendation for our Queen's Gambit declined players out there, d5. So after d5, we could go into a Queen's Gambit declined, maybe c4, e6, etc. But we're just going to do what most Tromp players do. They take, and then e takes f6, and then we're going to take a look at e3. And now at this point, you've got two choices. You can play c6, and again, this is why I recommend c6 for most club players instead of the move d5, and I'll show you why in a minute. But the other move is bishop d6, and of course, Kasparov, his idea in these positions is just, I want to open the position for my bishops. So he, as soon as c4 gets played, he's taking, and then he's going to castle. He wants to play f5 to control the center, and then he just wants to kind of finish his development. So there was two games here. One game went knight b5, and then another game went a3, and then he ended up continuing with c6 anyway. And then we had rook c1, queen e7, rook e1, g6, queen c2, bishop d7 in that game. And Kasparov went on to win because he's Kasparov. In the game that proceeded with knight b5, we had bishop back to e7, and then Kasparov captured in the middle of the board. He still played his g6 move, and then he played b5 and c5, breaking in the middle, and then putting his bishop on the long diagonal. Again, just trying to fully take advantage of the fact that he has two bishops, and Kasparov went on to win this game as well. So the first game I cited, that was Timon versus Kasparov, Wickensey, 1999. And then the second game was Ian Rogers versus Kasparov in 2001. So if you want to look further into that, you can look at those games. But d5 is an option for QGD players or anybody that's okay with accepting doubled pawns in exchange for a bishop pair. That's going to be what you want to do. So if you're not a QGD player, like say you're a King's Indian defense player and you don't want to mess with that, my recommendation is actually knight e4. It's also possible to play g6, and if you're a King's Indian defense player that's okay with messed up pawns, you can play g6 anyway, and then takes. And the idea is actually pretty similar to what Kasparov was doing. You put your bishop on g7, you play pawn to f5, you castle, and then you eventually break in the middle with d6 and c5. And this is similar. You just try to make the position work for your bishops. So you can play g6 and accept the messed up pawns as well. But knight e4 is what I recommend for most key ID players. And then after bishop f4, d5, f3, and then here's the idea. The idea is to bring your knight back to d6. This is the idea. White has kind of two moves that have been tried here. White can play knight c3, or white can play pawn to e4. Now, if he plays pawn e4, this is kind of the idea behind knight d6, is you're kind of preventing these natural breaks. You're preventing e4 and c4. So if they play e4, you go ahead and take it. And then I guess the only real idea is to play something like knight c3. And then we'll just follow this Masenko versus Anand, which ended in a really fast draw. Anand gave the pawn back with e3, bishop takes, and then he just kind of finished his development. He castled. And then here's the idea. He just kind of, white went after black's king side, but black just did something really simple. He just went after white's queen side. And then this cutesy idea right here, after knight h3, if you can see it, Anand just kind of forced a draw. So the move is knight takes b2, king b2, queen b4, king a1, queen c3, draw agreed. And Masenko, of course, didn't have much of a choice. After king b1, Anand can simply play bishop a3, bishop c1, and then queen b4 check, queen c3 check, queen b4 check, queen c3 check. It was a draw. So I guess white has to do something different. So after knight d6, probably white has to play the move knight c3, and then I think, black just continues with the move e6. It's also possible, like, if white plays something a little bit more passive, like, black can go into King's Indian defense strategy. He can play g6, bishop g7, and even knight c6, and castle king side. And actually, this is not a bad idea. You can play, or even pawn c6, g6, bishop g7, and then castles king side, then knight d7, and then later e5. I did this when I was a younger player. It worked out really well, actually, for black. So that's another strategy. But e6 is kind of what the big guys play. And then after e3, you play bishop e7. You finish your development, you castle, and then you play c6. And then this was another game. This was Jobava versus Mamanjarov. And Mamanjarov actually won this game with black because his queenside attack is actually pretty vicious. And I'll show the rest of this game. This ended really badly. You can already see, I think black has a sizable advantage here. Knight f3, a5, and then he just went after this queenside really viciously. And then after knight b3 check, the game is pretty much over. Probably Jobavo could have probably just resigned right here. He played on a little bit, but the position itself is pretty hopeless. He played rook c7 and then resigned without continuing. Clearly, the move queen d3 is kind of a problem, and I mean, there's other problems. So I mean, we don't even have to go into a huge amount of details here. So that's how you play knight e4. You play knight e4, and then the idea is to bring that knight back to d6 and kind of control c4 and e4, and we've got some good examples on how to handle that. So the last way that you can play against this is if you're a Nimzo-Indian player or an Open Sicilian player, or both, or you play symmetrical English or whatever, or you really just don't like getting your pawns messed up, but you don't want to play knight e4 because you don't like these positions for some reason, you have e6 as an option. And I would say like what 90% of your players will play here is going to be e4. Okay, it's also possible for them to just play knight f3, and then you go into something similar to kind of like a symmetrical English, like you play c5, and you're going to play like kind of almost a symmetrical English like setup. And then here you can either play queen b6, or you can continue with h6. And these positions are known to be relatively level, so this is going to be about equal. After e4, you kind of have to play h6 here. And then bishop f6, queen f6. And again, you have the two bishops here. And this is actually just considered a good thing. So knight f3, d6, and then knight c3, knight d7 to control the e5 square. But more importantly, what you're aiming for here is you're aiming actually for kind of an open Sicilian position, which is why I said if you're an open Sicilian player, this is going to be the thing to play. After queen d2, the idea is a6, and maybe you open Sicilian players see what's coming. castles queenside, queen d8. Again, this has a lot to do with, if you're an open Sicilian player, you understand that move. h4 and then b5. It's also possible to immediately play c5. And now maybe if you didn't see the transposition before, maybe now you see it. After d takes c5, we're going to play knight takes c5. And what you've got is you've got a Najdorf, is what you've got. And it's actually a pretty good Najdorf, too. It's a Najdorf where you've already kind of got a jump start on your queenside attack, of all things. So after h4, b5, we'll follow our main stem game. There's actually a couple games that Tony Miles played that were really good in these positions. So he's going to be our primary stem games. But, you know, other players have played this too. Mickey Adams has played this position as well, and a bunch of other strong players. So we've got a lot of really strong games to go from here. So we have bishop d3, bishop b7, king d1, c5, and if you play c5 right away, it's going to be pretty similar. You're aiming for a similar kind of move order thing. dc5, knight c5, queen e3, queen c7. You're playing a Najdorf. That's what this is. And then they're going to have to two-step this knight f3 to d4. And so there's this one game that Miles played. It went castles queenside, f4, king b8, a3, h5, f5, bishop e7, fe6, fe6, bishop e2, bishop f6, rook f3. And this is just a really good Najdorf. Rook c8, rook d2, bishop e5, rook f3, g6, b4, knight d7, and this is just not something you want to do. You don't want to have weaknesses here. And Miles went on to win this game with the black pieces. The other game that Miles played, which I think in some ways is even more impressive, was his early c5. And this ended up transposing into a very similar position. a3 and then queen b6. b4, just kind of getting desperate against the knight. Knight d7, knight d4, bishop b7. Bishop e2, bishop e7, rook g3, bishop f6. I just love the way this is almost like a dragon bishop going after these dark squares. And then after f4, we castled kingside, knight b3, rook ac8. Just really direct. And then this is like the only move I don't like in the game. After knight d4, Miles brought his queen back to c7, and he eventually won the game because just black's position is just so good. It was actually much stronger for him to play rook c7 and follow that up with rook c8, and then the game is basically just over. So yeah, if you want to play against the Trompowsky, those are your three options after bishop g5. You can play e6, you can play d5, and you can play knight e4, and they all lead to something that's either equal or in some cases it's going to be slight edge black. Black has a lot of good options against the Trompowsky. Those are the three main ones. Now, I'll give you one last one that's what I recommend for all the club players out there. If you're going to play d5, if you're like, I'm a QGD player and I want to play d5, I want to play Kasparov's favorite move, I recommend the move c6. And the reason I recommend this is it transposes directly into what Kasparov used to play. But there's a little added trick here. Of course, if they play bishop f6, ef6, you're just transposing directly into Kasparov. And actually, Kasparov's move here, his favorite move here, was queen b6, and after queen d2, he would play bishop e6. And this was perfectly acceptable for black. Black was doing fine here. Now, Kasparov played this as black. Of course, he used the d5 move order. I recommend the c6 move order because, at least for club players, there's a cute little trap here. If they don't take on f6, if they play like an automatic move here like e3, question mark, question mark, question mark, you have the cute trap queen a5, attacking king and bishop, and then after knight c3, you win a free piece. So that's an added little trap for anybody that wants to play the d5 variation. But if you're going to play against the Tromp, those are your three options. You've got these main three options. You've got d5, also c6, interchangeable, either d5 or c6, knight e4, or e6. So those are basically your options when you're playing against the Trompowsky. Another option that's available that I didn't cover in this video is you can also, of course, play g6, but the ideas in g6 are going to be very similar to d5. So if you look at my suggestions for how to play against d5, how to play with d5, it's going to be very similar to how you play with g6, because any position where you accept those doubled pawns in exchange for the bishop pair, they're going to have very similar ideas. So, okay, I hope that you found this video helpful. I hope that this answered the question of how to play against the Tromp, and I hope you learned something new about chess. Thank you for watching.